So today we are talking about AAC implementation and guidance and just some quick introductions. I'm here today with Dawn, and Dawn is from the Department of Public Instruction, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Dawn.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I've been with DPI now for 3 years, and I am the education consultant supporting speech language and assistive technology. And most of my career has been in the school setting, although I have worked in other settings, including supporting AAC and graduate students at the university level. So I'll turn it back to you, Kathy.
Awesome. So thanks, Dawn. My name is Kathy White. I'm one of the co-chairs for the AT Forward project, and I've been doing this for about 5 years now. Prior to this, though, I was the assistive technology specialist for the Janesville Public Schools. And that's where I spent my entire career. I am a teacher. I am not a speech and language clinician, but I've done a lot of AAC evaluations and spent a lot of time with kids. So don't know everything, of course, because no one does, right? But we are just here just to help give you some great information today.
And
So
Kathy, maybe we can have Jen Seal introduce herself real quick in case she jumps in on any of the slides. I know she'll be our special guest at the end. So
Oh,
go
even
ahead, Jen.
special guest title. Thank you, Dawn. Kathy. I'm super excited to be here. You all know any day I get to talk about AAC is a fantastic day in my book. So thanks for having me join you. I am the AAC program director at the Wasteman Center. We'll talk a little bit about our partnership program towards the end of this meeting. Thanks.
great, thanks, Jen. We do want to ground people too that in the why of why we did this. You know, it's one of those things where people are like, well, we did the assessment part last year, and we are going to be doing that again in the spring. We've kind of revised a few things. So if you didn't attend that meeting, we're going to do that one again in the spring. But when you think about IDEA and the requirements, it's about the delivery of service. It's all about implementation. It's not about the stuff. You know, we always think it's about the stuff, but it really isn't. It's about, did we get the right stuff for the student, and are we using that stuff to teach kids? So we're going to talk today about implementation, fidelity, progress monitoring, and thinking about, are we really looking in the least restrictive environment? And we really want to think about so many times, kids get devices and they get abandoned. And why is that? So the reason that we're kind of giving you this information is to help you reduce that abandonment. That's something we're going to talk about today quite a bit. So hopefully the information we're going to give you, you'll have a better understanding when we're finished. There are 3 parts to this implementation guidance that we are giving you. And again, it is guidance, okay? Because we don't know your students, okay? You know your student better than we do, of course. But we're just giving you some guidance, ideas, and resources. And what we did is we actually created this document, and I'm going to show it to you. It is not ready yet for publication, but this is what it's going to look like. So across the top, you're going to see the question, how we defined it, some tips and strategies, and then the resources. So this is what it's going to look like. We do have to run it through compliance with the Department of Public Instruction. So as soon as that's finished, this will be published. But as you can see, we tried to give you lots and lots of resources so you're not spending as much time going down too many rabbit holes, right? Because we can all get lost in those. So as I said, we divided this into 3 sections. There's the training, modeling, and the facilitation of AAC. And then there's the ongoing monitoring phase. And then there's the device maintenance. So this is how you kind of implement AAC in your district. So if you're going to do these 3 different parts, and there are parts that you may look at and go, oh yeah, I get that. I understand that. I'm good. And if you are, then you just go to the next one. It's not like you have to be solid in every single category, right, Dawn? It's just that it's giving you ideas and suggestions if you got stuck somewhere, okay? So that's our idea behind that. So let's go ahead and let's get started in this, okay? So here's our first question. Does your team have an implementation plan? And what is an implementation plan, right? You're like, oh my gosh, what is this? A lot of times people will say, well, it's just roles. Everybody just has their role for I'm the one who programs, I'm the one who makes sure that it gets serviced, whatever. But it's other things too. It's about strategies, wait time. If we all have the understanding of what our student needs, what type of modeling they require, it's going to help the process a lot better. And think about not just your teachers but also your OTs, your PTs, your paraprofessionals. They're with our students too, so they need to know what this is like. So also think about transporting the device. Years ago, I had a student who was very small in stature and didn't have a lot of strength. And the biggest problem for him was getting his device from point A to point B. So we had to think that process through. So and then everyone had to know what is the process for him getting things, because they're not in one room all day long. Many of our students are. So how do you go about this? As we said at each question, we're going to give you some ideas so that you can, and some resources. And if we look at the sample implementation guide here, and it's going to force me to make a copy always, right? Da, 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 here it comes up. So it's going to give you, who it is, the school, the date, all of those things. So you're going to go through and you're just going to fill this out. So this is, again, just an example of what you might do for an implementation plan. And if you don't like that one, here's another one. This one I actually really, really like. This one goes through, things like who's charging the device, who's troubleshooting. And then you can go through and you can mark each of these boxes. I really like this one, and I think it's a very easy form. This was actually, I think Sotillo made this one, one of the companies we're going to talk a lot about today. So let's see, 12, next one. Okay. Let's think about, here's our next question. Do you have a good understanding of meaningful vocabulary skills? And again, this was something that I had to learn because I was a teacher. I'm not a speech and language clinician. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. They told me how to teach core. Oh, but there are these things called fringe words too. And you always want to put some of those in there because our students, maybe they don't call their grandma, they call them nana. Or maybe they're highly into very specific dinosaurs, because we want to make sure that our students have very personal information in there too, and specific information that may or may, like if you've got a social studies class or something like that, think about, is that always necessary? Do we always have to take the time and effort to talk about things like magma and lava? You might talk about them, but do those words need to be in their device? Could you use instead the words like hot and red? Because oftentimes those are going to be used later. So think about your time and effort, and do you really have to have all of those specific curriculum words in there all the time? And I don't know. To me, it was kind of a mix of things. There were times when I put them in, and there were times that I didn't put them in. Here are some really good examples too. Like, how do I teach this stuff then? So now, do I do core words? Do I do fringe? What do I do? And how do I do it? I really like this one, the word of the week. If you've never taken a look at that before, this is a great way to do this. It actually has each of, introduction. You can pick, like here's August. We'll just pick that one, for example. And it talks all about what words we're going to use. Here they're talking about the core word was bye and goodbye. So that's our core word. How are we going to teach that? It gives you ways to use it, routines. These are just great examples. And it's a way for you to do repetition with variety. So you can go back again and teach bye and goodbye another time, but did you get through them? Nobody wants to do the same thing over and over and over again. So that is one way of doing it. And you can go back when you have time to go through each of these different resources. We did put the slides in there, so whoops, you'll have them. Sorry, I got a happy clicker there. And now I'm going to hand it over to Dawn, and Dawn is going to talk a little bit about this Gestalt and analytical language.
Thanks, Kathy. Boy, this is a controversial topic. Definitely has been discussed a lot over the last few years, especially. But because we get so many questions about it, we just wanted to include some information. So the question that we put in our implementation guide is, do team members understand how different ways of acquiring and processing language might influence the use of AAC? So analytic language development is the commonly known way to process language, and analytic language processors, or ALPs, develop language through single units, meaning, they learn one word to portray a meaning, and then they continue to develop language, add more words to create phrases, sentences, and eventually conversation. And then we have Gestalt language processing, or GLP. It's another way to process language. So instead of using one word to portray meaning, it's taking chunks of language to communicate wants and needs. And Gestalt language processors are able to hear the melody of language and may communicate through intonation at first, and may use echolalia to communicate their wants and needs. So echolalia that can be either delayed or immediately repeated. It's important to just recognize that those gestalts can carry meaning for the child and respond to their communication attempts. The term GLP is associated with natural language acquisition, and it's offered as a protocol to advance language development. But what we want to do is caution you to be careful about talking about students as being either analytical or Gestalt language processors, because definitely they could have both characteristics. So since there's not a lot of research on how to best integrate the Gestalt language approach with AAC, navigating this takes some clinical judgment, as well as consideration of input of some AAC users and the autistic community. And so some of the things that are suggested is to organize the device for growth, which we do with all students anyway. So the device and the system can grow with the child as they progress through stages of language development. And this can lead to both original and flexible language use. If the child is using gestalts and mitigations, incorporate those into the device and personalize the device for those. Consider things like, does your device offer video linking or recorded speech? Can you do custom scene pages and photos? Does it offer color-coded language organization for later use for students? So those are just a few considerations regarding different processing of language. And on the next slide, we have some links to research. So this big study came out about a year ago, and there's an apparent lack of empirical evidence in the form of treatment studies regarding NLA, or natural language acquisition, for students identified as Gestalt language processors. So it's really important that as educators working with children with neurodevelopmental communication disability, that we have an ethical responsibility to ensure that parents and others working in the field are informed that there is a lack of research into these practices. And like I said, just be cautious about categorizing a student as one or the other.
And Dawn, would you share some of these sometimes with parents, some of these articles?
I would, yes. Especially because, there's a lot of information that parents get from the internet or from, Reels, TikToks, things like that, where there's, really popular approaches and things like that, not just with GLPs, but even with other things. So it's important to share the research and make sure that we're using evidence-based practices in our treatment approaches. The next area is literacy. So do members of your team have an understanding of literacy skill and implementation strategies? And are we considering that with AAC users and starting from a very young age? So literacy is the ability to use printed and written information to function in society. And literacy skill development includes, as we know, phonemic awareness, phonics, vocabulary, reading fluency, and comprehension. And so with every student we encounter, our goal should be to educate them to their highest abilities and to effectively tailor our instruction, no matter whether the student is using essential elements or Common Core standards, that we're addressing literacy skills from the beginning. So teaching students with complex needs to read and communicate is really a huge part of this goal. And it may appear like, a really daunting task, but we often just need to start and be consistent with teaching letters, words, and concepts with everything that we do. And so on the next slide, you'll see actually a new resource that just came out, a guidance from DPI on administering literacy assessments for students with low incidence disabilities and complex communication needs. And you'll find a lot of ideas and strategies in that for, really assessing where your students are at regarding their literacy skill development. So make sure you access that. It is linked here, but it's also on the Wisconsin Reads page on the DPI website. There's another resource on the slide, Comprehensive Literacy for All by Karen Erickson, which is a great resource for you to really look at literacy skills for students that have special needs. And yes, someone put in the chat a must-read book. Definitely a very helpful resource, and some other resources as well that you'll find here.
And remember too, with book studies and things with your districts, I did a couple of book studies on comprehensive literacy for all, because everybody's like, well, I don't have time to read the whole book. So don't. What I did is, like, elementary got chapters 3, 4, and 5, middle school got a few more, high school got a few more. And then I'm like, okay, everybody read the chapter and come back and tell us the jewels, find us what you really liked about in that chapter. And then we shared it. So, there are ways to kind of use these great resources that are out there without kind of bogging us down, because I know we all don't have time. And just remember too that, we've got a symbol on a communication device, but always have those words. We have to assume that that child can read. We assume that they are cluing into those kind of things, because we don't know. And remember earlier we talked about vocabulary, and that you can't have everything on the device. It's impossible. When you're especially talking about curriculum words. So if you can start to teach your student to even get in the ballpark for describing a word or describing an action. We don't want just nouns on our communication devices. Kelly Fonner, is someone who we work a lot with. She tells us, don't be a noun picker. Don't just have nouns on your devices for kids, because we want them to learn how to spell and to read and to write. And you never know where that's going to go with your students. So we also put on there, think about Bookshare. We don't often think about reading or having our students read who are very complex learners, but they should be listening and seeing the words. If you've never looked at Readtopia, Readtopia Go, or the Monarch Reader, those are also great resources.